Hey there, Python programmers. Today we have a really informative video that is going to talk about three topics. And I don't like to do that, but these three topics are so closely related, it doesn't make sense to split them up into separate videos. So, the first topic and the overall topic is going to be parameters and arguments. We definitely have talked about these already. If you forget, parameters are values we can pass to a function, or when we define a function, we can set up them to have parameters, kind of like variables for the function. And then our arguments are really very closely related because when we call our function, we pass in the arguments, and then those are inputted as our values as parameters. So hopefully that's a bit of a review. Now, when it comes to arguments, we kind of have two broader types, and then we're going to get into more fine details. So we're going to write this function that's going to take in a couple numbers and just sum them. So let's start out with just num1 and num2. And what we can do is, and then we'll just, whoop, I can't call them both the same thing now, can I? We'll return our sum, and then we'll want to print it when we return it. So that's the start of our function. Again, super simple. So num1 and num2, when we want to call this function and give them values, we put them in here. Now, technically, there are two ways we can do that, positional or keyword. Positional means matching up the positions. So if we want num1 to be a value of 1, well, we need to provide that first, and num2, 2. Cool. So if that's what we want, we can go ahead and give this a run. I can type today. This is 11. Boom. Now look at that. We get 3. 1 plus 2 equals 3. Cool. Now, this is if we want to provide the arguments positionally. We don't have to. We can provide them by keyword, and there might be reasons to do so. The biggest reason is if you're providing keyword arguments, they don't have to be in any specific order. So I can say num2 equals 2 first, and then I can do num1 equals 1. And hey, we should very much get the same result here, but again, we pass these values in differently, out of order. So those are the two traditional ways. Now there's a little more to it, and that's where we're going to get into some of the other topics I have listed up here. So one other thing is what is called a default parameter or default argument. Now, the order of these matters. So, positional arguments have to come first, and then we can do a default argument. And a default argument is very similar to a keyword argument, but you're defining it in the parameters section. So if I say num3 equals, let's just do 3 here, right? What this is going to allow for is we have to still have a num1 and 2, right? Our function says these are required. Num3 is kind of optional now. If we do not provide a third value in our argument call, it's going to default to assigning the value 3 to num3. So if we go ahead and add num3 into our calculation right here, we'll give this a run and save it. Cool. Well, we didn't provide a third argument here, so it went ahead and used the default argument. To do the opposite, let's provide 6, just again so we can see it's a very different value. If we provide that third value, hey, it sets num3 equal to 6 instead. So this is a very helpful thing to have in our set of tools for when we are defining and calling functions. Now, there are two other things we want to talk about because sometimes we might want to throw in optional extra information into our function, and we can do that provided we set things up. So this is where the words of args and kwargs are going to come in. So let's first talk about args. Args are to collect any additional positional arguments. Again, very specific, only positional arguments. And what we need to do is use this thing called the splat operator, which is just an asterisk. Now, it is the same as when we do multiplication. So in Python, what happens is if we had a value on either side, Python's like, hey, you want to do math? Or again, we could have a string because we're allowed to multiply strings. So Python infers, figures out we want to do math. But when we use Splat on its own and put it in front of a variable, it's going to do a very different thing for us. So again, this is only for additional um, positional arguments. So what we're going to do now is let's add in 5 and 6, right? Cool. So we have some new values. Let's just see what we've got here. So what happens is this splat operator collects all these extra positional arguments and it stores them in a variable called args. Should have that S. Now, it does not have to be called args, but it is a convention in Python. Very similar to how we talked about a convention in Python would be to name, a variable, a constant variable that you do not want overwritten, all capital case. Again, at no point does naming it pi mean that we can't overwrite this value. It's to tell other Python developers, don't do that. Don't overwrite it. I would like this to be a constant permanent value. So that's kind of like that with the args. Let's go ahead and print our args right here. Let's give this a run, and now let's see what we're getting. So args get collected in a tuple, but now we have access to them here inside of our function. So we could do for arg in args, and we can do sum plus equals that arg. And now what this is going to allow us to do, kind of cool, right, is we can collect as many arguments as we want to pass in. It's going to sum them all up. Now, it is very important to put this after your default variable, because if you put it before your default variable is actually going to get caught in the args, and we don't want that. So again, our order when defining our function and parameters very much matters. We want positional required arguments first, then any default arguments, and then we can go ahead and use args to collect any additional, again, positional arguments. Hopefully we're doing well so far. So we got one more thing, and that is kwargs, or keyword arguments. Again, sometimes we may want to have a keyword argument added that is not position. Now, we actually do need 2 splats for this, and we are going to talk about why in a little bit. Let's just absorb again what we're doing here with the parameters and how we're kind of mapping arguments to them. So now we've added this thing called kwargs. Let's go ahead and print it so we can see what that's all about. Again, just like our args, kwargs is a convention for naming, short for keyword arguments. So we should use it. Again, it's a convention. Other Python developers might look at us funny if we called it soup or carrots or something else. So they do have to be keywords. So like while this does not have to say num4, or num5 or 6, it can be whatever we want. So let's set num6 equal to 7, and let's do 2 of them. We'll do num7 equals 8, right? Cool. So we are passing basically now every different kind of argument we could to this function. Let's see what we get there. So our keyword arguments, and hopefully this isn't too crazy for us, are stored in a dictionary because that's really our one data type that has keys and values. So it's really the only one that will work. But what it now does is allow us to collect any single argument. So we can add just a tiny bit more code here. Let's do for kwarg, why not kwarg, in, we'll do kwargs, but considering we know that it's a dictionary, and really we only care about the values here, let's do kwargs.values. Yay. L-U-E-S. And then what we can do is sum plus equals kwarg. And now if we return our sum from this function, we are collecting every single one of these. We've got 1 plus 2 plus 6 plus 5 plus 6 plus 7 plus 8, all summing up to 35. So again, this is a way that we can do even more with our function. At this point, the summer function can handle any kind of information we're putting into it. We know it has to have two values because again, positional arguments are required. It could have a third, and then it could have as many positional values as we want after that, and then we can end up with all of our keywords. So that's pretty much our parameters, arguments, and args and kwargs section. Now, the last thing I want to talk about a little more, because we brought it in here, is the splat operator. If you're familiar with JavaScript, splat is basically identical to the rest and spread syntax of three little dots. If you're not, hey, I'm going to tell you about it. In fact, I'm going to show you. Now, in the parameters section of a function, splat collects any value that we put in here. It's going to collect it into the args variable, and keyword arguments will get collected into the kwargs dictionary. And it works that way only in parameter definitions of functions. Everywhere else, including arguments, so if we use splat in here or just in our code, it spreads out our values, and I'm going to show you what that means here. Let's just take out running summer for now, because again, we're not going to be involved with that. We're just talking about splat. So I'm going to make a list because really, typically you want to use it with lists. You can use it with strings, but lists and dictionaries are the big ones. So we're going to make a list. And again, just simply 1, 2, 3. Let's make a second list. List 2. This again can be strings. Oop, just don't want it as a dictionary. Let's do A. B, and why not C? So let's now make a list. Boom. 3 equals, we are going to set it equal to splat, list 1, and then comma, splat, list 2. And again, once I spell them right, let's now hit that list 3 and see what we got there. Cool. So hopefully what we're seeing is it is spreading out those values. It's basically saying, hey, I have a list that contains 3 values, and I'm going to spread them out here into 3 separate values. So what we get is a single list. Again, it's kind of like concatenating here. But that's what our single splat will do. So again, anywhere in our code, it's going to spread those values out, but it will also do so if we put it in the arguments section. Cool. One other thing we need to know about our splat, because we see it up here, I had 2 splats in front of kwargs, and that's super important. When you deal with a dictionary, and again, a dictionary is really the only thing that has like a key value pair, we need 2 of them. And again, let's make a dictionary and see why. So I love to make dictionary with meals. We'll do breakfast. Breakfast was eggs, maybe. Why not? Sounds good. Again, I'll just make a simple one. We're going to do lunch. Set that equal to a sandwich. Yeah, sandwich sounds good. We probably want dinner. We might be hungry now. Let's do dinner. What will dinner be? Maybe a pizza. Cool. Nope, you need strings. Cool. So, nice, simple dictionary. Let's say our meals 2 is going to be equal to a dictionary where we splat or spread meals. And then all we need to do is print meals 2. Let's give it a runsy. And hey, look, we did get some information spread out into meals 2, but it is only the keys. Again, a single splat is only going to spread out one value, and that is why we need our double splat. So To finish off this video, we will just add a second splat to our meals here, give it a save, give it a run, and now we see that's why we need that second value if we're spreading or splatting a dictionary, because one of them will spread out the keys, and then the other one is going to handle the values. And again, up here, we need two of those to collect the keys and collect the values. I'm hoping you enjoyed this video and learned a whole lot. Again, these concepts here we are going to use in so many other places. So again, this is a great video to spend some time. Hope you like this video. Like and subscribe the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you soon with a brand new video.